I want to be the very best. 8.1 geometric mean. Now, we've all remember from Algebra 1 how to find the mean of something, the average of something. Now we're going to find the geometric mean. Let's see what that does. All right, let's find the geometric mean between 4 and 9. So to find the geometric mean, you actually have to set up a proportion, what we've been working with. There it is. So the geometric mean goes in these two positions, and then the numbers that they want to find, the 4 and the 9, go in the other two positions. All right, so the geometric mean is always going to be the same diagonal from each other. Go ahead and cross multiply. You have to remember that x times x is x squared. And then 4 times 9 is obviously 36. To solve this equation, square root both sides. Normally when you square root both sides, you have a plus or minus answer, but since we're talking about distances, we're only going to take the positive answer. X equals 6. So 6 is the geometric mean between 4 and 9. Let's do another one. Find the geometric mean between 8 and 10. So we're going to put x in that spot for geometric mean, and then the 8 and the 10 in the other two spots. Cross multiply. And then solve. Square root both sides. And then by now, we're going to focus on not using our calculators this chapter, but simplifying the square root. Remember, when you simplify the square root, you want to break it down. I'll show you a little bit of work here. That's 8 times 10. Break down the 8. I know I'm going sideways now. 4 times 2. Circle that. Break down the 4. 2 times 2. Circle those. Oh, that's a bad circle. And then break down the 10 as well. I know I ran out of space because my face is in the way. We have 5 times 2. Circle the 2, circle the 5. So then to simplify it, we would find pairs. Remember, pairs. There's a pair of 2's. You write it one time. There's another pair of 2's. You write it again. And then the loner 5 stays on the inside. And that's what the answer looks like. The 2 times 2 gives you a 4, and then the loner 5 stays on the inside. So that was just a quick review of simplifying square roots. Let's do a tricky example. Find the geometric mean between those two. Those are like weird numbers, but we can still do it. See, there the geometric mean is right here still. And then those two numbers are still the other parts. Cross multiply. X times x is x squared. And then your job is to figure out how to multiply these together. And it's pretty simple. The outside multiply with the outside, the inside multiply with the inside, and the bottom multiply with the bottom. And so the 2 times the 5 gives us the 10. The square root of 7 times the square root of 7 is square root of 49. And then the 3 times 3 is 9. And then, of course, we do know what the square root of 49 is. It's 7. And now we can simplify that more. X squared is equal to 70 over 9. But now we really have to solve for x by square rooting both sides. When you square root both sides, that's what you get. The square root of 70 on top doesn't simplify, but the square root of 9 on the bottom does simplify, and that's just a 3. And there's our final answer. Kind of tricky, working with exponents, working with roots, radical signs, which is a good introduction to what you guys are going to be doing in Algebra 2 next year. All right, so our first theorem of the chapter. If the altitude is drawn to the hypotenuse of a right triangle, then the two triangles formed are similar to the original triangle and to each other. All right, so what does that mean? you have a right triangle. There it is. Triangle ABC is a right triangle. It has a little square in the B angle, which means it's a right triangle. The theorem says if you draw in an altitude, the altitude is just a straight line up and down, the height of it, from the angle to the hypotenuse. So I just drew it in. It turns out if we do that, 3 triangles are now formed. Can you guys see all 3 triangles? There's like the original big one, and there's a smaller one, and then there's a really smaller one. Hopefully you can see it. Now you have to label it correctly. Let's look at the biggest one. The very tip of it is A, and then if you go straight down, it is B, and then if you go over, it's C. Now let's try to use the original picture to label our medium-sized triangle. The very tip of it is A, but be careful when you go down, what letter is at the 90 degrees? It's D, and then B. And then let's look at the smallest triangle. The very tip of it is B, and then D, and then C. All right, so we have to basically take the picture and then draw 3 separate triangles and try to match up the corners correctly in the correct order. So the first part of the homework asks you to write a similarity statement. So it's basically taking the triangle, splitting it up into the 3, and labeling it correctly. And this is the similarity statement. So triangle MNT is similar to triangle MSN, is also similar to triangle NST, and it has to be matching up properly. Otherwise, the theorem doesn't work. So that's the similarity statement. All 3 of those triangles are similar, and I think I forgot to mention it in the previous slide, but yes, all 3 of those triangles that we just drew out, they're all similar to each other, which means all of its pieces, or all of the corresponding pieces, are also going to be proportional. All right, so let's do an example. Here we have the same picture that was out there. There's a right triangle, there's an altitude that's drawn in. Let's go ahead and break them up, if it's easier to see, into those 3 pieces. And now we're going to label all 3 of those triangles correctly. All right, if you look at the largest triangle, the hypotenuse is actually 23. It's this whole length. That's how we got this 23. And then the leg is the x, and that's how we got the x. All right. The middle side one, this one right here, it looks like the hypotenuse of that one is x, and then the other leg is 15. And then let's go ahead and do the smallest triangle, this one over here. And I guess the only thing we know is that this side is 8. Okay. Now to solve for x, you're going to look at all 3 of those triangles and see which 2 of them you can set a proportion to. And it looks like these 2 have the most information, and they're going to help you set the proportion to solve for x. There it is. I took x and then compared it to 15, and then I took 23, and then I compared it to the x. And there's what we have. Notice this is called the geometric mean. We did it earlier, cross multiply. And then I guess 345, when you square root it, does not simplify anymore. So that is the final answer. Let's do another one. Let's break these up into 3 triangles. Let's label them correctly. The first one, if you notice the hypotenuse, is x plus 14. It's that whole length right here. But I think that's the only thing you know about the largest one. The medium-sized one, that's x and that's 20. And then the smallest one, that's 20 and that's 15. So you're going to ask yourself, well, which of those two are going to help me solve for x? And it turns out that if we just focus on these two, set the proportion, we will be able to solve. Now in this case, these two guys are the geometric mean. They're the ones who are always the same. But cross multiply and solve. You should get x equals 200 over 7. All right, moving on. There is a shortcut. So if you guys didn't want to draw out 3 separate triangles every single time and try to match all the sides up, there is a shortcut that will be very helpful. All right, so if you notice in the picture that I gave you, I drew in 3 lines that are a little bit different colored than the triangle. This line, and this line. Those are going to be the geometric means. They're the ones where when you write out the proportion, they're going to be the same. All right, so it always comes from this right angle. It's always going to be this side, or this side. All right, so we're going to go we're going to explain each case right now. Let's say this is your geometric mean right here. Then the other two sides are always going to be around here, the D, and all the way, D plus E. There it is, D and D plus E. If our geometric mean is this one, this C, then the other two sides are going to be this side, the E, and then the whole side, D plus E. There it is, E and D plus E. If we're dealing with the geometric mean that is this middle one, B, there it is, B, then its geometric mean is this side and this side, E and D. All right, so maybe that shortcut's a little bit hard to understand, but once we use it a little bit, it will become a little bit easier to do. So let's do it. All right, so here we have an example. Instead of breaking it up into 3 separate triangles, we're going to use the shortcut to fill in the proportion. In this case, the number that goes here every time is always going to come from this corner, either here, here, or here. In this case, it's this one, the 30. And I think I drew out the picture, so let's see if it happens. There it is. So the number that goes in these two spots is going to be the 30. Oh, there it is, the 30. And then the other two spots, when the geometric mean is on this side, then you always use the side it touches, 20, and then the whole side, 20 plus x. So there it is. Cross multiply, and then solve using your pre-algebra skills. You do get x equals 25. All right. All right, this one's the last one for the day. It is labeled tricky, and the reason why it's labeled tricky is there's 2 variables. So it doesn't make it too bad. But you would set it up the same way. Just ignore one of the variables for now and just focus on the one you're solving for. All right, let's solve for x. Ignore the y. All right, to set it up, remember, whenever you do this, the two numbers that go here always come from the 90 degrees, so either here, here, or here. And it looks like it's the 7 that goes there. 7 and 7. When it's the 7, you always use the side it touches, and then the whole side. There we have it. 7 and 7 right in the geometric mean spot, and then 5 and x plus 5. Cross multiply using your pre-algebra skills, we get 24 over 5. Let's do it for y now. Alright, same thing for y. The numbers that go here, the geometric mean spot, always comes from here, here, and here. Now we have two choices, the 7 or the y, but since we already did the 7, and we actually need the y, because that's what we're solving for, that means that we have to use the y in this spot. Okay? And then remember, when it's the y, you use this side and this side. Here it is. Cross multiply. Oh, in this case, the x we already solved for, we can plug that in. When you cross multiply now, we have y squared equals 24, and then square root both sides. With simplification, we get y equals 2 radical 6. All right, go ahead, try the homework, see how it goes, and I will see you tomorrow.